Gorgeous harmonies, relatable lyrics, girl power. Girl groups have been a critical part of the pop music landscape since at least the 1960s, and arguably even earlier than that. From the Motown legends to 80s new wave bands, to the Brit groups of the 90s, to the reality show created ensembles of the 2000s, girl groups have topped the charts and captured our hearts for more than 70 years. Now the great pop culture debate wants to answer the question, what is the best girl group of all time? Tonight's the night we're going to make it happen. Tonight we'll put all other things aside. I'm your host, Eric Resniak, and I am so excited to be recording this episode. Please welcome my panel, the great pop culture debate's answer to the Pointer Sisters. First, baby, she's a do-right. It's Ama Marfo.
Can't wait no more. Baby, let's do this.
I am feeling you, Ama, yes. Next, he's the Kelly to my Beyonce, the T-Boz to my Chili, the nameless other supreme to my Diana Ross. It's Curtis Creekmore.
That is the single most hurtful thing you have ever said about me.
I mean, I could have called you the Michelle to my Beyonce, so yeah. Finally, he's only recently learned that wearing a condom as an eye patch is not effective at preventing pregnancy. Please welcome to the podcast, Jake Lewis.
I'm now only serving the responsible red light special.
Okay, but what about your friends, Jake? So, before we get to the debate, how does this work? We made a poll of just about every girl group we could think of. For our purposes, a girl group was any musical that, one, it was comprised entirely of women, and two, had at least an element of pop in the music. We included groups from all generations and included international groups if they had significant success in the United States. Our listeners voted, we tallied their picks, ranked them by popularity, and added them to a bracket. Now we argue about it and insult each other, all for your amusement. Want to play along at home? You can. Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and go to polls and brackets. There you'll find the downloadable listener brackets for this and every episode of our little show. Do your picks match up with ours? Do you think we should make like Ginger Spice and GTFO? Let us know by dropping a comment on this episode on our website or by yelling at us on Twitter, Instagram, or Mastodon. Now, if you're curious about how we went from the top 32 down to the Sweet 16, become a Patreon supporter of our podcast. Our patrons at the $5 level or higher get exclusive access to the warm-up/part ones for each episode, in which we work our way through all of the round one arguments. It's like a whole bonus episode for each topic, and it includes arguments you will not hear anywhere else, and it's just one of our great Patreon perks, so please subscribe today. Now, with that out of the way, Ama, can you handle this? Curtis, can you handle this? Jake, can you handle this? I actually do think we can handle this, so let's move on to these debates. First up, a unanimous victory for ultimate number 1 seed Destiny's Child, which proved that winning was not 5 seed Blackpink's Destiny Child. Next, the panel is evenly split between an actual sister act, 3 seed The Pointer Sisters, and 2 seed Wilson Phillips. Ama, why do you want the panel to hold on for one more round when it comes to Wilson Phillips? I will take a slow hand and dare you to explain how a victory for the Pointer Sisters could be anything but automatic. I'm going to have Ama go first.
So I'm going to take an offbeat tack on this. Each group had a pop culture moment associated with a hit of theirs years after the initial song was successful. For Pointer Sisters, it was the episode of Saved by the Bell with Jesse Spano's brief addiction to caffeine pills, whereas Wilson Phillips' Hold On eventually resurfaced in Bridesmaids. One of those references has aged beautifully. One of them has aged like milk. It was silly in the moment, the Saved by the Bell one, but if you go back and watch it now, people are panicking over so little. And I think comparatively to something like Bridesmaids, which in addition to bringing Wilson Phillips back for a different generation, also was just kind of part of a massive comedy moment. Like, we hadn't had successful all-female casts in a really long time, and really never to that level up to that point. And it just kind of paved the way for that type of comedy to do well, for Paul Feig to be able to do more, for Melissa McCarthy to be able to blow up. And that is the tack that I'm choosing to make for this particular argument. It might not be the one that everybody would use, but on that front, I'm giving it to Wilson Phillips for their effort to continue to stay relevant. This is an audio medium, but I can see Curtis vehemently shaking his head at me, so I can't wait to hear what this is all about.
I'm going to be very candid here. This one kills me. I love both of these acts, and I'm fine with either one advancing, honestly, because they're both great girl groups, and they are like definitive girl groups for their time periods to me. Although there was like I feel like the Pointer Sisters butted right up against when Wilson Phillips became famous. So really, they're almost contemporaries. So I cannot put into words how much I love the Pointer Sisters. I love them. Whenever I'm feeling down, like my kind of like shorthand for it is time for a Pointer Sisters dance party. I don't dance. It doesn't matter. But I still listen to the Pointer Sisters because they're like a musical mood reliever, honest to God. I don't know if it's the music itself, from their fiery R&B/disco tracks to their outstanding 80s pop bangers, or if it's those incredible harmonies that only actual siblings can achieve. Bottom line is, I love them. One of the things I love most about them is that they have such an incredible catalog. There are the songs that everybody knows. I'm So Excited, Neutron Dance, Jump, Automatic. I could go on. But then there are the other lesser known songs that are every bit as amazing. Dare Me, He's So Shy, Fire. They beat Wilson Phillips on that front, no question. They had 13 top 20 hits between 1973 and 1985. I think in the best possible world, Wilson Phillips had maybe 5, and that's being very generous. In 2016, Billboard ranked the Pointer Sisters as the 80th most successful dance artist of all time. And in 2017, Billboard ranked them as 93 in the most successful Hot 100 artists of all time, 32 in the Hot 100 women artists of all time. So they've got a lot of actual statistics to back them up, but I am not mad either way because these are both incredible acts. This should be a round 3 matchup, not a round 2 matchup. They both deserve to be in the Elite 8. That being said, Jake, where are you on this one?
I think I'm gonna go with Wilson Phillips on this one. I just, as far as impacts of their biggest hits, I think Hold On just has more than the Pointer Sisters for me.
That's fine. And I mean, like, how does anyone resist Hold On? It is a perfectly crafted song at that moment in pop history. It is perfection. Curtis, where are you on this?
She almost got me. Bridesmaids is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I love Melissa McCarthy. That's why I was shaking my head, because I get what you're saying. But when I listened to the actual music, I listened to these. So please go listen to the Spotify playlist that we put together for this episode. If you haven't had a chance, it's out there. We're going to post it on the website. Listen to them back to back. Listen to the songs that we have by each artist that are going up against each other. And when I listened to the songs by the Pointer Sisters, I loved them more than the songs by Wilson Phillips. I enjoy Hold On. It's a great song. It's a fantastic song in Bridesmaids. I love that moment with the like the whole thing. I love it. However, all of Wilson Phillips' songs sound the same to me. It's very, Eric, clutch your pearls, girl. You go ahead.
Say your piece.
I will say because I am not a super huge fan of 80s music, but all of Wilson Phillips' songs that are on that playlist, and also just what I looked at on my own, it's all very.
I mean, it's very that. It's very that.
It's very. But the Pointer Sisters, you get different shit. You get Jump. You get the Neutron Dance. You get something different every time, and it's all fucking phenomenal, everyone. And if you go from the RuPaul's Drag Race scoreboard, which group has had more lip sync songs? And I'm pretty sure that goes to the Pointer Sisters. I don't know that for certain. I have not looked that up.
I'm 99% that's probably true. But that being said,
who wants to go?
I actually think that would be a great lip sync song. Let me just exactly that clip that Curtis just did. Just put that on a loop. Yeah,
I'll give you
one.
One.
Better walk that fucking duck. But that being said, even if we stay tied,
I know
the number one, Wilson Phillips is a 2 seed. The Pointer Sisters are a 3 seed. So Wilson Phillips will advance.
It hurts.
I'm at peace with this because Wilson Phillips is fucking amazing. I do want to say 2 quick things before we let the Pointer Sisters go. And I'm going to digress a little bit on this episode because there's a lot of unanimous decisions, as they're going to be finding out. Number one, if you have not ever listened to the song Dare Me by the Pointer Sisters, please do so. I don't know if I put it on the playlist, but it is incredible. And I never heard it. I don't know if it was ever a single, but it is just unbelievably good. Number 2, We talked in part one about Christmas music, the Ronettes, etc. Both of these acts actually have very successful Christmas songs. The Pointer Sisters' Santa Claus is Coming to Town, off of A Very Special Christmas, is how I typically start my Christmas season every time, because the opening, a lot about spoken word openings in these songs. I don't know what's going on, but is it June Pointer who comes at the end, I want a bicycle? Like it's cracked out, but it gets me every time. And the actual version of their song is, I can't make any jokes about them doing drugs. That's actually really bad because there was some dark stuff there. But bottom line, it's an amazing rendition and it will get you in the mood for Christmas, stimulants or not. So, Amma?
Sorry, I just want to make an additional point while we were talking about Christmas music as it pertains to the Pointer Sisters.
Yes.
So there is an additional pop culture scene that I neglected to remember, and then it just popped in my head, is that whether you like Love Actually or not, there is a wonderful dancing moment of Hugh Grant dancing through 10 Downing to Pointer Sisters Jump. So do with that whatever you would like. Turns out probably nothing, but I did want to make sure, because people, I'm sure when I say like pop culture references, someone will inevitably be like, but didn't you remember? Yes, I did. As I was talking, here it is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's weird. The spoken word intros and Christmas music keep coming up in this, and neither one of those things is actually germane to the topics, but we keep coming back to it. So there you go.
Jake has a hand up.
Oh, Jake, yes.
As long as everybody's interjecting here.
Yes, please.
We've
I
got
love it.
so much time on this podcast. Curtis made the point that about the RuPaul's lip syncs. Didn't Kristen Wiig and Maya Rudolph lip sync to Hold On at the end of Bridesmaids?
They did.
Is that right?
I mean,
if we're having a lip sync off, I mean, just throwing that out there. I just towards Curtis.
And I think we have to be honest here. Maya Rudolph absolutely shantaed and stayed on that one.
Of course she did.
And Kristen Wiig sashayed away. Let's just name it.
Well, Minnie Riperton's daughter's not going to mess that up. How dare she?
Exactly.
She knows exactly what she's doing.
She does. Well, thank you for a spirited debate. It's a heartbreaker, but we will be advancing Wilson Phillips into round 3. Next, the majority of the panel is feeling a little bit country with 1 seed the Dixie Chicks, aka the Chicks. But Amma's feeling a little bit rock and roll with 4 seed the Bangles. Jake, make like a cowboy and take the Chicks away into round 3. Amma, get manic regardless of the day of the week and wish the Bangles to advance. I'm going to have Amma go first.
So this is not going to be particularly good audio, but I've changed my vote. So I was like, I could try to fight for the Bengals. I'd rather not. I would like to give it to the Dixie Chicks. I've had some time to sit on my choices, and I have come to a different conclusion than I did on whatever day I did this bracket.
Eric, I would like to hear you defend the Bangles because I think you love 80s music.
I'm happy to do so. Before I go into that, I think I just need to acknowledge that much like their song, the hero takes the fall. Sorry about it, Bangles. I love the 80s music. We already, if you have not listened to part 1, we knocked the Go-Go's out. And if you would ask, and Bananarama, if you would ask me for like the 80s rock trifecta, it would be Bangles, Go-Go's, and Bananarama. Of them, I think I would put the Go-Go's in gold medal place and Bangles in silver, but they had terrific songs that were iconic to that decade. Eternal Flame, Walking Down Your Street, obviously Walk Like an Egyptian, which is arguably probably not super politically great in a 21st century moment. A great cover of Hazy Shade of Winter. Is there anything that necessarily distinguishes them from other bands? Not necessarily. They're also up against the Chicks, who have many things to distinguish them. I mean, what an arc, let's just say that. But also, I don't want to say they're incredible musicians, because frankly, the Bangles are also incredible musicians. These are really talented acts. Yes, they are, Curtis, I see your face. But the bottom line is, I can't deny, I think I even put the Chicks ahead here, but we did want to speak on the Bangles. But I do think this is the correct decision. Anybody else have anything else to say about the Bangles?
I really enjoyed Walk Like an Egyptian. Like, I don't know why. Was it on like a mixtape on like, what was that called? The thing that where you could pay 99 cents for a CD. Columbia,
Columbia
Records.
House.
Columbia House.
Columbia House or BMG.
I
Yeah.
feel like it was probably included on one of those like mixed CDs.
Or
I
the
have
Time
no
Life
idea why.
collections.
I grew up with that song and I really enjoyed it. And I may have been Cleopatra for Halloween one year. I have no idea. But I do appreciate that song specifically by the Bangles, but not against the Chicks.
Not against the
no,
Chicks.
ma'am.
Yeah. I mean, it was everywhere in the 80s. That song was absolutely everywhere. It was a juggernaut. But okay, we're unanimous and the Chicks will advance. Speaking of unanimous decisions, the panel decided that 2-seed Salt and Peppa had all the right seasonings to advance over 3-seed Little Mix. Would anyone like to say, I know we had a lot of discussion about the Little Mix Fifth Harmony kind of their merits and their faults in round one. But does anyone have anything else to say about Little Mix before we bid them adieu? This was one of the X Factor UK version engineered girl groups, correct? Am I right about this?
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
that's right.
Yes.
But
I say something?
honestly, go ahead, Amma.
I was just going to say, can I say something about like the principle of manufactured groups in the first place?
Yeah, this is a great time to talk about that.
I don't think that's bad. I don't. I think that there's been a lot of discussion about like, is it a legitimate group, quote unquote, if you were put together by a manager or brought together by a reality show? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Like, it's a means by which to meet people. Like, it's not unlike to me, like a Tinder or a Hinge or a Grindr or what have you. It is a means to put you together in a room with people that you might not otherwise have been. Now, are there often mistakes made in those situations? Especially on Tinder and Hinge, you betcha. That's really all I'm dealing in at this point, if we're being honest. But I think you could also get really good things. Little Mix being one Direction being another. I want to make sure that like we recognize that the mechanism, at least in my mind, doesn't reflect on the potential quality of the product. Even something like Backstreet Boys or NSYNC, similar thing. So let's not shit on it as a mechanism to put our groups together. It works. It gets the job done.
Completely. And this is a terrible analogy. I'm just going to acknowledge that right off the bat. But like, we have scouts who go and create sports teams, right? And these are not people who would ever find themselves together. How is it any different from an entertainment perspective to have scouts coming together and bringing together these groups that work really well together? And especially in the case of like the reality shows, the X Factors or whatever, they're putting people in and taking them out and seeing when the actual vibe is right. I think it's both an art and a science to that. And I agree, it's often frowned upon. Like, so this episode is a bookend to our boy band episode from like a couple seasons ago. I genuinely can't remember. And O-Town, which I love, and our producer Bob is on this episode. Stan O-Town, saw them in concert, no regrets. # marry me Asley. But like they get a lot of shit to this day for being, it's that making the band group, right? But I agree. Why are we dismissing them just because they competed? They were all selected as bring something to the group, and they ended up turning into a really fantastic little boy band. And same thing for Little Mix / Fifth Harmony. Jake, did you have any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, just a lot of the manufactured girl groups, I think a lot of them lack like performance, the art of performance, really. I mean, they don't work well together, is what I'm saying all the time. So I saw them open for Ariana Grande, super, super gay, and they put on such a good show. I think just from that aspect, they're super entertaining. Songs are catchy. Do I think they need to stay in? Not particularly, but I think they deserve their flowers as well. So
Absolutely.
There is a super interesting and very straight connection. I'm going to just make that heteronormativity right there. To sports, because Eric brought it up. So I'm from Kentucky. We do not have professional sports, but we have the college sports is a huge thing. And specifically the University of Kentucky, their coach, John Calipari, is very well known for building teams. He's very good at recruiting people, but he recruits stars. And in the last several years of UK basketball, it has been 5 stars who don't know how to play together as a team. And that is such an interesting connection between those, that when you get 5 people who are meant to be amazing at the thing that they're doing, but they don't know how to play as a team, you can't connect and you cannot create a group. That is very, very interesting to me.
Yeah. That was the butchest segment that will ever happen on this a podcast, and it happened during our girl group episode.
I know,
And the
right?
straight had nothing to do with it. I didn't even
Exactly.
help.
Wait,
Look
which
at
one?
that.
Oh, yeah, you.
Me.
That's right. Yes.
I'm the straight. I did not
Yeah,
help.
you are the straight. The one thing that I will say about Little Mix that I said in our Patreon exclusive episode, I'll drop some knowledge. Little Mix holds the record for having the highest chart entry for a debut album of any British girl group in the US. And they are also the first girl group to have 5 consecutive top 5 albums in the UK. And in 2018, they set a record for the longest charting album by a girl group inside the top 40 of the UK albums chart. So it's not like they weren't a legit thing. Lil Mix is real. They are a real group. They are a successful group. But when they go up against a jug, like, what are you going to do?
Right. I don't think anyone on this podcast is a Little Mix denier. Let's put it that way.
No.
It's just they're up against Salt and Peppa, who have pushed it right out of the bracket. So we will advance Salt and Peppa to round 3 next. Speaking of flavor, another unanimous decision as the Spice Girls, a 1 seed, said goodbye to 4 seed Bewitched. But Amma, I know you found yourself under Bewitched spell. Do you want to say a few words about them before they leave the competition?
As I look at how this bracket is continuing to shape up, I do think that it is a document of perhaps like the general age group and like time of life where these groups kind of came into our lives. Not across the board, but I do think that a lot of it is. So like the idea that Bewitched was on here at all, if you had to name 32 girl groups through the entire population, it might not have charted. But I think the age that I know I was at, and perhaps a couple of us were also at, and the voters as well, the age that they were at, it was this undeniable thing where it was just like, we knew that there were groups from Ireland. Like, it wasn't as though that wasn't the case, but like they were the girl group to come out of Ireland at the time when they had like a Disney Channel special, when Disney Channel specials were responsible for lifting up a number of groups. So it was really interesting to just kind of see them pop up that way and kind of give affirmation to Irish girls who took Irish dance and did not really have a way to explain what that was or why it was important. It was a moment in time where something really big happened, and that's kind of where we were accounting for, which is how I think it got as far as it did to the first place. But ultimately, going up against who it went up against, it wasn't going to win. It just couldn't. Curtis, I saw you waving. What's up?
Please indulge me for a reading. I got a house with windows and doors. I'll show you mine. Now show me yours. How can you argue with that kind of prophetic lyricism of Bewitched? That's
filthy.
That's from C'est La Vie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If you didn't know, that is
No, I
from C'est La
recognized the second you started. I was like, I know exactly where this is going.
Yeah. I appreciate that Bewitched is the very 90s. I'm watching Nickelodeon in my pajamas on a Saturday morning, nostalgic feel to it. Their sound reminds me a lot of S Club 7. And dear God, was I obsessed with that band as a kid.
They're reuniting.
No.
I'll send you an article.
Oh,
All
my
7
God.
of them?
All 7. They got Paul. Yeah, I didn't think they were going to get Paul. They got Paul. I'll send you an article.
My night has been made, everybody. Oh my God. But it's the motherfucking Spice Girls. Bewitched sounds like a Kids Bop version of the Spice Girls. So no, there is no question here.
We're saying stop right now. Thank you very much.
Exactly right. Jake, anything for you?
No, I just love that Curtis didn't think that we knew those lyrics were from C'est La Vie.
It's like, we know.
Yeah,
we were the audience.
We were there. Bewitched. That's the song I know from Bewitched. I mean, we know Spice Girls' whole catalog, so not really a comparison there.
Indeed. So we will be advancing the Spice Girls into round 3. Next, Stop in the Name of Love. It's another unanimous victory, this time for OG girl group The Supremes, a 3 seed, which decided that 2 seed En Vogue was never going to get it. But I do want to chat a moment about En Vogue because they are an incredibly important girl group. And this is the part of the podcast where I talk about how this particular episode had some wild seedings and the fact that the Supremes are a 3 seed is just baffling. This, in my opinion, is a round 3 battle. These are two that they should have been fighting into the final 4. En Vogue going out at Elite 8 is insane to me. This group is critically important to like the through line of girl groups, right? I would argue that En Vogue is coming in after you have your 80s rock groups, right? En Vogue, I think, is one of the first ones to kind of reopen the door to R&B, having more of a voice in popular music. I mean, R&B has always been there. It's always been, but like in the 90s, R&B was huge. And I really think En Vogue and Boyz II Men both had a huge part to play in that. Massive hits, incredible voices. Free Your Mind is one of those songs that like as a teenager living in lily ass white Lafayette, New York, like that was a like, okay, no, actually like things I need to hear. You know what I mean? It's a terrific group with amazing talent. It kills me that they're going out at this early, but it's against the Supremes. Jake, any thoughts on this?
Kind of the same perspective as you. I mean, Texas, surrounded by all white people for all of my early childhood. Just hearing songs like Free Your Mind, it's educational. You don't really get that from many girl groups, but it's kind of preachy in the right way, you know? So.
Yes. Ama, any thoughts from you on this one?
This, I think, was probably my hardest bracket choice where, like, I realized that these two were going to come together and it just felt awful. Like, I think if they had come up together at any point, it would have been awful. But this early, it was too much. I talk about this every time I'm on. It was like, there's always one matchup that is like audible groans to me in this house where I live by myself. And I was like, I don't know who I expect to respond to my distress. But this was the one that was like, oh God. But yeah, as I did have the Supremes going all the way, so that meant anybody in the way was going to have to fall out.
Yep. Curtis.
But that is to say that the Supremes as a 3 seed, I am flames on the side of my face, angry. That it is that the Supremes are so low and that they had to go up against a group like En Vogue, which was so seminal to my childhood. Like, Don't Let Go, My Lovin', Hold On, the beginning of Hold On, that like the note that then turns into the quartet basically of it, like, oh my God, it's so frustrating and angry that this group that was so important to music itself in terms of the 90s and R&B and girl groups and everything is going out now is just it's so frustrating to me.
Yeah.
I would put En Vogue above TLC.
Oh,
I know that means a lot to a lot of people on this podcast, and we're going to learn about it. But to me, En Vogue had more of an impact and a long-lasting, like a legacy in terms of their music than TLC, which ended up in a 1 seed, as we will find out later on. There's a lot of head shaking that you all can't see, and I don't care. I am entitled to my wrong opinion.
You are entitled to your wrong opinion. Absolutely. There'll be some head shaking, heartbreaking. Whoa. But we will be letting En Vogue out of the bracket, unfortunately, and moving the Supremes on to round 3. Rounding out our unanimous decisions in round 2, it's 1 seed TLC, which is going to creep right on to round 3, making it a discordant ending for 4 seed Fifth Harmony. Do we need to say anything else about Fifth Harmony? I know in the first round we talked about this was a group that launched two juggernaut careers in Normani and Camila Cabello. But I think we've kind of covered the Fifth Harmony contributions to the oeuvre. And then, but wait, there's more. Rounding out round 2, we have a split decision between 6 seed the Ronettes and 2 seed the Pussycat Dolls. Curtis, loosen up our buttons and convince us that the Pussycat Dolls are perfect for Elite 8. I will ask my panel who still wants to remain the Ronettes baby. Curtis, you go first.
Wait. I did originally choose the Pussycat Dolls.
You did.
I have changed my vote.
Okay.
To the Ronettes. I convinced myself earlier this evening when I was doing some research. The Ronettes are amazing. Who else chose the Pussycat Dolls?
I think I may have. I believe it was actually going to initially be up against the Go-Go's, and I might have picked that. But we can talk about the Pussycat Dolls.
So, I would love to hear about the Pussycat Dolls.
Sure. So I think the Pussycat Dolls are your early 2000s manufactured American girl group, which I don't know if there are any others that fit that mold. What I think is interesting about the Pussycat Dolls, I mean, the origins of it are actually kind of interesting, right? It was Robin Anton who kind of like was doing this with her celebrity friends, like in garages in Hollywood. Like there were actual, like Christina Applegate was originally a Pussycat Doll, but they weren't performing. Maybe they did like, yes, this is a thing. Look this up. This is true. I
had no idea that was true.
This is true. This is all from memory, by the way, but I saw this on, like, I was watching something and learned about this. So it was like a bunch of like celebrities that would get together and put together little dance numbers and burlesque numbers, mostly for each other. But I think they did have a residency at the Viper Room in LA like once a month. And then people were like, you should do this as like an actual thing. So that's when they started to build an actual group and they kind of lost the celebrities. The Pussycat Dolls are arguably Nicole Scherzinger and friends. And
friends. Thank you.
The rest of them are, and like we do know some of their names thanks to the song Buttons, in which, who is the rapper who's on that? It's Snoop, right? I think it's Snoop on Buttons, who's like Nicole, Tiffany, like he names them
by first name.
Yeah. So we know that, but I feel like they're
Snoop.
interchangeable,
Yes,
and I do believe that like they come and go out of the group. There's like any number of members of the Pussycat Dolls.
They're like Lady Menudo.
Exactly, they're Lady Menudo. Yes. They did have some huge hits though, and in fact, they continue to have some successes even now. I hate that part. Hush Hush is a great song.
Oh, I do love Hush Hush. Oh,
they actually have some really huge hits. They have more hits, I would be willing to bet, than the Ronettes, especially if you subsection off the Ronettes' Christmas successes, which Curtis tends to go back to.
Yes, because they're important, Eric. We're not going to just throw those out.
And I really don't want to know what a Pussycat Doll Christmas album would sound like. But I think where the Ronettes has an edge here is that the Pussycat Dolls are a girl group really only because Nicole Scherzinger has backup acts, and the Ronettes were more of a group, although you could argue that it was Ronnie Spector and the rest. Jake, thoughts on this matchup?
I'm torn, mostly because a lot of my future arguments deal with the lead singer of the group kind of being a star.
Yeah.
A lot of my choices were kind of based on that. Girl groups tend to have that one big star, you know. Yep. I think Be My Baby is a better song than any songs that Pussycat Dolls have, but Pussycat Dolls do have a broader catalog. But if we're going off girl groups, you're right. I mean, Nicole Scherzinger is the Pussycat Dolls. So I'm going to go with the Ronettes.
Ooh, it's getting spicy. Amma, where are you on this?
So I think that there's a difference between having a girl group with identifiable front women and less identifiable background members versus a well-known front woman and indistinguishable or interchangeable background members. And I feel like the Ronettes is one of those, and the Pussycat Dolls is the other. So given the fact that like the core of what I believe the Ronettes to have been, and I'm open to being corrected if that's the case, less known versus interchangeable, I would take the group that was less known but built that core. So I'm going Ronettes on this.
Okay. So I think that's 3 for Ronettes. Curtis has something to say.
Yeah. So I want to, number one, shout out to Nicole because she grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you. That's the one thing that I know about her is that she grew up in the state that I am from. And that was like my one connection to her. I will say, even though I am stumping for the Ronettes, I changed my vote. I do believe that the Ronettes need to move forward. There are some amazing songs that the Pussycat Dolls put out, but everything that everybody just said is true. It is Nicole Scherzinger, however she says her name, and these other people that sing behind her. And like Amma just said, the Ronettes are the Ronettes. I could not name a single Ronette. That is a girl group.
Well, there you go. The Ronettes keep chugging along in this bracket. They're now a 6 seed going into round 3. The Pussycat Dolls are knocked out. That is the end of round 2. We're going to take a quick break and jump for our love. We will be right back after these messages.
Hey listeners, it's Bob from the Great Pop Culture Debate. We hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're yelling back at your speakers telling us how wrong we are. Did you know that there's a much better way to tell us how you feel? Come kiki with our panelists on Discord. Our patrons at the $10 level get access to our exclusive Discord server where you can share your thoughts about our decisions or just gab with our group about everything pop culture. It's like participating in your own episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Untucked. We have something for everyone to talk about, including reality TV, comics, news, nostalgia, and so much more. So if you love spirited debate and fabulous people, become a Patreon supporter today and join in on the conversation.
And we are back for round 3 of our best girl group debate. Before we get to the Elite 8, I want our panelists to share their social media because you all are the lead singer in this group and the rest of us are your backups. So, Amma, how can people find you? And what else are you working on?
Sure. So I'm on Instagram and YouTube at Amma Marfo. First and last name, no spaces, all those letters in that order. And I have a half hour of comedy out. It is called Enjoy Your Nachos. It is streaming on YouTube and at ammamarfo.com/comedy. So you got to watch it. I made a promo video today about it, and 3/5 of the cast of Triple Frontier really want you to see it. So do what they would want you to do.
They're love right. It. Congratulations, Amma. We're so delighted. Curtis, how can people find you and what are you working on?
I ain't working on anything, honey. You can find me on basically anything that you want to yell at me at Curtitch, Curtitch. I should do more with my life.
That's depressing, but thank you. And Jake, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Not working on anything, just like Curtis. We're just bums around here. And Instagram is That Takes the Jake. That's it.
We love that. And you can find me at Eric Resniak on Twitter and Instagram. That's ERICREZ as in zebra, S as in snake, N as in Nancy, YAK, or just message at Great Pop Culture Debate account on Insta or at GPCD on Mastodon. Now, let's move on to round 3 before our listeners discover that my weakness is indeed men. First up, we're going to go around the horn. It is Destiny's Child versus Wilson Phillips. I'm going to start with Amma. Where are you on this one?
Destiny's Child.
Curtis?
I don't think you're ready for this, Jelly. Eric.
I do love Jelly, though.
Ma'am, this is... Whoo! We haven't even talked about Destiny's Child yet. And I know we will. But I will say, wow. So my vote goes for Destiny's Child, too.
All right. Jake, where are you on this one?
Yeah, if we're talking about groups that launched people, I don't think there's a bigger launch than Destiny's Child. So, yeah, Destiny's Child.
Kelly Rowland's doing amazing things. Yeah.
I'm so happy for her.
I will give it the clean sweep. I will say in honor of Wilson Phillips, I think people are just like, yeah, hold on. But they had several other significant hits. Release Me is a great song. You're in Love is a great song. And God, I debate whether or not to tell this story. I'll anonymize this story because I don't think this person wants to have their name associated with this. I have a friend who in college in the 90s used to make money by bending over and using his ass to sing "You're in Love" to his college like dorm floor mates. It was like a show that person would put on. And every time I hear that song, that's all I literally text that person and tell them, guess what I'm listening to right now. So thank you, Wilson Phillips.
That is the most amazing thing I think
true.
I've learned. Through
You
this
know
podcast.
that person too. You know them well.
Wait,
Yep.
for how much money?
I can't speak to that, but it was the 90s. So bear in mind, $1 went a lot further then.
Yeah, boy, did it.
The other thing I will say is that as someone who was in middle school when Wilson Phillips was a thing in the 80s, Wilson Phillips, specifically Carney Wilson, was responsible for what all well-dressed women of the 80s, the style of the hat, the sweater, and the leather jacket. That is the Carney Wilson look. And like, to me, she will always be famous for that. Carney Wilson, you will always be famous. So
It's very Ross Dress for Less.
but it was
I love
for
a Ross
more.
Dress for Less.
Yes, it was
Love a
for
Ross Dress for
more.
Less.
Or if you're from the South, the fashion bug.
Exactly. That being said, Destiny's Child is advancing into the final four. I think that's where we are. I can't count. Next, it's the Chicks versus Salt and Peppa, which I feel like that's the start of a nice fried chicken dinner. I'm going to start the end of the roundup. Jake, where are you on this one?
Oh, the Chicks. I mean, just impact overall, all the albums. I mean, yeah, Salt and Pepper are great. I love them, and I said Pepper instead of Peppa.
Oh, you
but
did.
I know.
Terrible.
Just cut that out. I just love the Chicks. I mean, they put on a great show. I saw them twice last year. Incredible. Just from their activism, everything else. I mean, they're the winners for me.
All right. Curtis, where are you?
I want to take a minute or two and give much respect to the man that's made a difference in my world. Oh my God, this hurts. Oh, this is so painful. This is like your Southern roots ripping against who you were meant to be. And there's just enough of who I was meant to be in the Dixie Chicks because I listened to Fly, specifically the song. It was also the name of the album, but the song was like my escape. And that song, if you have not listened to it because it was not a single, I don't believe, it's like a deep cut off of that album. It is truly a beautiful piece of music. I'm going to call them the Dixie Chicks. I know they're the Chicks now. I know that they've tried to make that right. Yeah, I have to go with the Chicks. I have to go with the Chicks here because that music, that trio, even though it's very much a Natalie Maines is the lead. There is a lead of that group, and then you have the two other sisters who I can't name, but I don't even think they care. They know how that work groups. It's a triangle. Triangle is the strongest shape. I have to go with the Dixie Chicks.
Salt and Pepper is also a trio.
I don't care.
Amma, what have you got?
I think both of these groups kind of like in their own right for the form that they mastered and then for kind of larger areas that they managed to conquer or inhabit did some truly impressive things. And actually the point about the Chicks versus the Dixie Chicks is an interesting one because I think that they're, like we said, they've had an arc and they've had a story and like that was a chapter that they had to reckon with. I think they made the right choice, whereas there are other groups that made different or made their choices harder than they needed to be. But I do also think that a really big part of their story is kind of how they were silenced and had to push back. And it's so hard. It's so hard because I don't want Salt and Pepper to go out like this, but like I have a sense that if the Chicks don't win this, then on some level the terrorists win. And I don't want that. So to what degree does my vote matter?
It's a great question. So seed-wise, the Chicks are what seed are they? A one, and Salt and
They're
Pepper
one
is a
seed. 2.
That's okay. So we already have 2 for the chicks. They are going to advance here, but I want us to talk more about Salt and Peppa because I do think, as you were kind of alluding to, Amma, you have one that's a country pop crossover and you have one that is a hip hop pop crossover in a time where hip hop, especially female hip hop, was not really crossing over into mainstream America, and they blew the doors off of that.
They did. They blew the doors off, and the people that were able to come in as a result, like, my God, just they paved such a strong and well-traveled and really, really influential path that, like, I hate that, like, this is like it's not going to matter. So, like, I do kind of want to speak up for them. I'm going to give it to Salt and Peppa with the full understanding that means so little. But again, I keep coming back to the show, even though that keeps happening to me.
I know, and we love that you do. I will say this. I actually might throw my vote to Salt and Pepper as well because it ultimately doesn't matter, right? The chicks are advancing. I guess the solace I find is that at least they're not being taken out like a punk. They are going up against not only another incredible group of artists, but a group of artists that have a really interesting arc and a very strong political message. Like, I don't know if the chicks have another type of analogy within girl groupdom in terms of the political kind of impact they've had. Someone can prove me wrong on that. I'm delighted to hear it. But Salt and Pepper's being taken.
I think you're right among female groups.
Right.
I think that's true.
Yes. And I think like the fact that they have to go out to like a titan like this makes me feel better because Salt and Peppa are titans. Salt and Peppa had tremendous impact on the fashion of the time, the sound of not just the time, but everything that came after for a decade plus. Incredible lyrics, so sex positive, right? Curtis, I see you raising your hand.
Something that we had talked about, Eric, kind of off the air was how with this specific topic, and because we've had so many unanimous decisions, there's a very clear differentiation between like the top 32 of these types of groups and then like the top 16/8 somewhere in there. And this is where it gets, God, it's just painful to make these differentiations because these groups are just, they're so good and they did so many different things. And it's like which apple or orange is the best, but you can't compare them because they're both apples and oranges. And you have to like, listeners, this is very challenging.
Yeah, and I hope you're enjoying it as we squirm for your amusement.
But we don't take this lightly. My stomach hurts.
This is painful for me.
They're both tremendous groups, and it does not matter. The chicks are advancing based on the seedings here, but I have just incredible respect for Salt and Peppa, and I was sad that Spinderella has left the group now. Apparently, that was a development like fairly recently. She's like, I'm out. But like we were blessed. Right. And
she spinned it up one time.
She did. So we will be advancing the chicks next in another absolutely insane matchup because both of these acts should have been like 2 seeds at the very least. It's the Supremes versus the Spice Girls. Jesus. Curtis, you might not be able to hurry, love, but I do need you to hurry up this debate since we might be running over. Talk to us about the Supremes. Jake, if you want to advance the Spice Girls, you got to get with my friends. Forget 2 becoming 1, turn 1 vote into 4 for the Spice Girls. I'm going to have Jake go first.
So the argument I have for the Spice Girls doesn't mean that they're a better quality group than the Supremes, because I don't think many people on this list are. I think Diana Ross has a beautiful voice. The songs are great. I think impact-wise in my life, again, it's got to be the Spice Girls. I mean, I know every one of their names. I know their movie. I mean, all of the members of the group have their own personality, and everybody knows who those people are, and they've all had careers after the Spice Girls. I mean, so the Supremes, I know Diana Ross, and I saw the air quotes. Most of them had successful careers. according to some sources on the internet, they are the best-selling girl group of all time. Like 100 million copies sold. So don't fact check me on that, but that's what I read on the internet. And again, like the people that were inspired by them are crazy. Like you've got people like Adele and just massive artists that call back to this girl group that the lyrics aren't great to their songs. Their voices are good, but not Adele level great, but they somehow inspired this massive artist that again has massive reach, not because she was inspired by the Spice Girls, but she was inspired by them. So I think cultural impact for my generation, I think it goes to the Spice Girls.
So before I give it to Curtis to talk about the Supremes, I do think it's important for people to understand. So if you're listening to this and you're either over the age of 50 or under the age of 30, I don't think you properly understand when the Spice Girls were hitting in that late 90s, early 2000s. I think it's the closest that we have come to Beatlemania in our lives. And in some ways, I think the Spice Girls are closer to the Beatles than they are to any other girl group. For exactly the reason you just made there, Jake. Every one of them was a celebrity that we all knew. They all had their thing. And even though they weren't the greatest singers or the best dancers, it didn't matter. It was almost a religion. Like the Spice Girls really were. They were like genetically engineered, literally, because they were created, through producers, to basically be the girl version of the Beatles. And they did it. That was a tall order, but they did it. And they, like, again, if you weren't in that window where you were a teenager, 20-something, or actually even younger, because I think girls, like young girls, were also very much inspired by the Spice Girls. I think in that way, they have done things that I don't know if any other girl group has done. I really genuinely believe that. They're just up against the Supremes. Curtis, take it.
The one thing that I will say against my argument before I begin it is girl power.
Right.
Girl power became a thing because of the Spice Girls. And I think that is a huge moment for, it must have been the 90s. But we're in the Thunderdome now. Mm-hmm. We have reached the pinnacle. These, is it 8 that we have left, groups, have all had an undeniable impact and have changed the very fabric of pop culture with their music and their existence. I love the Spice Girls. As a flamboyant little homosexual, the choreographed dance numbers that I did in my bedroom to various and sundry Spice Girls songs were plentiful. And to be quite honest, I probably wasn't even introduced to the idea of the Supremes until I was older than when I met the Spice Girls. As we have already said, the fact that this group, the Supremes, is a 3 seed is an unacceptable travesty. The Supremes were one of the OG girl groups out there, and they were encouraged to take a different approach, not only to their sound, but also to their look. I learned this in my research. I love that in the man's world of music of the 60s, they leaned into their femininity and glamour. They wore gowns. They were feminine. Their sound was meant to be more feminine. Their 1966 album, The Supremes A Go-Go, was the first album by an all-female group to reach the #1 on the US Billboard 200, which knocked the Beatles' Revolver out of the top spot. And in case you're thinking, Curtis, you said the same thing about the Shirelles earlier, I was confused as well. But the Billboard Hot 100 is for singles, whereas the Billboard 200 is for albums. And I did not know that. But so this album knocked the Beatles out of the way. Outside of music, do the Spice Girls have a Tony Award winning musical based on their lives?
Not yet.
Though I am happy to write that. Call me Broadway. But just because they were one of the first does not necessarily mean that they are the best. The fact that they are the best means that they are the best.
Yeah. It's, again, tough. Amma, where are you on this?
So I think some autobiographical background is helpful for why this is a challenging one for me. So I was in the sweet spot of when the Spice Girls hit in 1997. I was 11 years old. But at the same time, because of the way I was raised as the child of two immigrants, like I did a lot of music catch up on my own. So in what I imagine is probably, well, I haven't been on a whole lot of other music ones, but have we mentioned Columbia House twice in the same episode before?
I'm living for it. Go for it. In fact, I still think I owe them some money for some of the CDs they sent me, but go ahead.
Yeah, they'll never catch me.
Nope.
But yeah, so at the same time that like the Spice Girls were hitting, I was kind of doing my own musical education. And that was the point where my sister and I were very into Motown. So for me, those are concurrent. Like I was dealing with two things at the same time. And while I will say, again, there's nothing bad to be said about the Spice Girls here. I love them. They were fantastic. Again, like really formative moment. I think that girl power is a little bit, well, here's what I'll say. I think that there have been efforts to dismiss what girl power was as an entree to most women around my age for feminism. But that was really the first time that there were like women can stand up, or like they would get insulted at an award show and boom, just go right back. And like the idea of women being able to stand in their power, like that was something that for our age was fairly new. And I see so much of like Beyonce being able to declare herself a feminist, or Taylor Swift being able to declare herself a feminist, as starting with that. And that is something that like can't be ignored. But there are also problems with the Spice Girls to consider, one of them being like we are reevaluating a lot of things about race culture and how Mel B was treated. If anybody watches Pen 15, there was an episode about there's a show on Hulu about like growing up in formative age, probably created by two women that are around the same age that I am. One of them being a woman of color, an Asian woman, and how she was made to be Scary Spice and how they treated her, and how her best friend who was white like realized what racism was because this incident happened in the yard. And it brought back a lot of stuff for me. Like I watched that episode, I get emotional. I've heard it's Maya Erskine, who plays the character Maya on the show, talk about it. I get emotional. I've had conversations with my sister about it. So like there were amazing things that they did, but there are also like personal things that are a little bit harder. And like that's got its own challenges. But independent of all of that, the Supremes are the blueprint. Like you said, they actually have two projects that are inspired by their story, Dreamgirls being one, Sparkle being the other. So the idea that their story has begat so many other stories, like that's huge. And again, to date, the Spice Girls have not done that, but that's something pretty significant. The fact that, like you said, like first number one hit, I'll also say going to musicals, they play a significant part in somebody else's jukebox musical because they have a significant piece of the Ain't Too Proud to Beg one, which is the Temptations. The Temptations had a hard time rising at Motown because the Supremes had created a wall. Women being able to do that for men is massive.
Yeah.
So there's so much of this debate we wouldn't be having if the Supremes had not existed. It feels impossible to put anything ahead of them. And how did they get to be a 3 seed? Like, I don't even have the words for how baffled I am by that. Like, how? How did that happen?
This is why democracy doesn't work. But I do think like this could have been a final two matchup, and I would have seen it as being completely understandable.
Yeah.
I believe right now we're 2 for Supremes, 1 for Spice Girls. The Spice Girls are technically the higher seed. I have to give it to the Supremes. I have to. And I will say this, Curtis kind of was like, the Spice Girls don't all have, like, the Spice Girls all have careers. I am currently doing a speed run through The Circle on Netflix. And if you've not watched this show, and season 4, I was like, I don't really like this season very much. And at the end of episode 1, who walks in as catfish contestants? 2 of the Spice Girls. It's Scary Spice and Baby Spice competing as a catfish profile, so nobody knows it's them. And they're there making cakes, playing with their dog in the apartment, trying to figure out how to convincing people that they're like a 20-something guy children's author. And I'm delighted. But like, no, they all have legit careers. I mean, obviously Victoria, fashion icon. Mel C's music. How is Mel C's solo music not bigger? She has amazing songs. Clearly the best singer in the group. And if you have not listened to her actual solo music, banger after banger, Baby and Mel have done great work as hosts. They're hosting things constantly. Mel is now one of the judges on Queen of the Universe, and Ginger is Ginger. She's my favorite slag. Like, she's just great. So they've all done very well for themselves. The music is iconic. It has inspired a completely different generation than the Supremes. However, would we have the Spice Girls without the Supremes? I don't know as we would. Maybe we would have gotten there eventually. It's kind of like a question of music evolution, right? Would life eventually have found a way? I'm sure. But would it have been as fabulous? Would it have been as defining? I don't think it would. Curtis?
I just want to say that if being on a reality TV show or competition show means a career, I have a career, Eric.
It's different. You let me know when you're decorating cakes. All right.
Call me. Please call me.
So that being said, Jake, I am sorry. We are going to advance the Supremes over the Spice Girls. Can you live with that?
I'm willing to make it unanimous. I mean,
Oh.
Spice Girls is just my little gay heart rebellion because the Supremes were okay. I mean, my mom loved the Supremes. I thought the Spice Girls were just so edgy and different and cool but the Supremes are amazing. I mean, every point that y'all made, I agree with. They were the blueprint. Alma was right.
I do want to make it clear. You do not have to change your vote. It's completely fine.
No,
But-
I want it to be unanimous.
All right. Then it will be unanimous that the Supremes continue. And I believe we have another unanimous decision in favor of TLC, which showed no little tender loving care for the Ronettes. Is anyone voting for the Ronettes over TLC here? Are you doing it, Curtis?
Yes. Why not?
All right,
Because
before
it
we get to
doesn't
you-
matter. Okay.
Jake, are you voting with TLC here?
Oh, 100%.
Amma, are you voting for TLC here?
I am.
Yeah. Like, we've made the argument on the Ronettes. We've made it several times.
Okay.
There is literally not a chance in hell I'm voting against TLC here. So we will advance them to the final four. With that, we have the final four. We're going to take a quick break to chase some waterfalls. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back with the final four of our best girl group debate. At this point in the show, I always like to take a step back and see if the final four lines up with what I would have expected. We have Destiny's Child versus the Chicks, aka the Dixie Chicks, the Supremes versus TLC. So we have a 1 seed, a 1 seed, a 3 seed, a 1 seed. I think the Spice Girls easily could have been here. I think En Vogue probably could have been in here. But I have to say, there's no one in this final four that I am at all mad about. You have 90s, 2000s, 60s, 70s, and 90s. That's what we have here, essentially. The 80s are all out. I actually think that makes sense to a certain degree. These were the heydays of the girl groups, right? These two eras. And, you know, maybe we're going into another one with the K-pop folks, but let's start with round one, Destiny's Child versus the Chicks. I'm going to start with Amma. I know, I see her cringing already. Amma, where are you voting?
I just wanted on the record that during the break, I went to take a Tums because this part's hard for me. I'm sorry. I've blacked out with the difficulty of the task. What are my choices again?
Destiny's Child versus the Chicks.
So when Beyonce headlined the Super Bowl, I'm indifferent to televised head trauma. I don't care. But I was already excited to see Beyonce, and then she put the power out in a major city, which, cool. And then the scream, I scrumped. When the rest of Destiny's Child showed up, like, I was with a friend who was living in a residence hall at the time. I caused a problem. Like, I was almost made to go home. Like, it's such a big thing. Like, and not even just in terms of like launching Beyonce, but like the type of thing that they were able to do wherein pop music girl groups of that era did not look like them. And the degree to which that they pushed through and crossed over and then created somebody more, well, yes, created one person who was able to further transcend that, and then other people who have like viable careers in their own right. Kelly Rowland's doing amazing acting work. Michelle Williams gets shit on a lot, but she's also doing wonderful things and is very happy. And like, it's massive. I think if we were going to talk about like the Supremes having the impact that they had, like, I think the next level of that kind of like, that's Destiny's Child. And I love the Chicks and respect what they've done and just spoke so passionately about the idea of like the arc that they went through and the decisions that they had to make. But for me, Destiny's Child comes out on top on this one. I might not win it, but that is how I feel.
Curtis.
I want to leave. I want to leave this podcast because I can't. I honestly, I don't know that I can make a decision here. Like, Eric, this is the first time that I want to say no. Like, I just can't. Which apple or orange is better? It's just, they are two distinct things in my mind. They are two halves of me as the little gay boy from Kentucky who listened to literally both of these groups in what was the development of who I am as a person. Like, I'm in tears. I don't know if you all saw it. You all can't see these four people who are watching the film. They can see I wiped tears from my eyes because I don't know how to make a decision here. I picked Destiny's Child. I think in large part because of the literal queen that has become Beyonce out of this group, but that's not fair. Beyonce is not Destiny's Child, and Destiny's Child is not just Beyonce. There are other people who are in that group, and the Dixie Chicks is not just Natalie Maines. We are looking at who are these groups when they made music, and it is so challenging to me to have to choose between the two because they are so important to the person that I have become. I could name literally lists of songs that are equally as amazing. I've said it in multiple episodes that I've been in up until this point that this is the most difficult decision, but this is the most difficult decision that I think I've had to make, and I'm going to have to wait. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to defer to the rest of you.
Jake, with that being said, where are you on this?
Well, I feel bad to make a decision now. Like, I don't
No.
something.
You're good.
No. So I had Destiny's Child going the whole way, but I don't think that my bracket ever had them going up against the Chicks. I don't know how I did that, but so I mean, Amos points about Kelly Rowland and Michelle Williams. I mean, Michelle Williams' gospel album is really good. I mean, she's probably the most discounted member of that group, and she still has a very good career. I mean, nobody wants to be the Michelle, but Michelle's not doing that bad.
Nope, exactly.
I love most of my arguments were for Destiny's Child versus the Supremes. I mean, that was kind of where I thought this was going to end up. But I have to give it to the Chicks. I hate it. Just like Curtis, these are two like top tier. And I mean, a lot of it is because of Beyonce, because I love Beyonce with all of my heart. If it was Beyonce versus the Chicks, a lot easier choice for me. I love Beyonce. But it being the groups, and I think Emily and Marty from the Chicks are just such amazing musicians. Their harmonies are impeccable, and the political impact that they had on me. I mean, I was coming out of the closet right now, but I was a preacher's kid, so I was pretty much Republican all the way. Whenever they did what they did overseas, I was one of the people smashing their albums. And right at that coming out period in my life was when taking the long way around, their album that was like their comeback album, with Not Ready to Make Nice, and Everybody Knows is like my coming out song. And so it's for me, it was a moment in time for me that is so like deeply ingrained with me. Those songs were the songs that were the soundtrack of my coming out years. Destiny's Child were there too, but those were the songs I danced to. The Chick songs were the songs that I cried to be honest. And I think that cuts deeper, to be honest. And so I hate it. I hate it. Maybe not as much as Curtis does, but close. And I'm going to have to give it to the Chicks.
I will chime in and say I agree with all of that, and I do think that the political thing of it, like to imagine that back then it was so scandalous to say something that was frankly pretty middling. It was just like, we don't like him either, I think is what they said about him, right?
Yeah.
I think that was
Yes.
literally and it literally led to death threats and the destruction of their career. That's like one of those signs that we have lost it, folks, right?
Oh yeah.
As political as they were, Destiny's Child is also extremely political, especially Beyonce. What Beyonce has done as a political icon cannot be discounted. I think it's every bit as important as what the Chicks did in their own way. Curtis said that, Destiny's Child is not Beyonce. Beyonce is not Destiny's Child. That is technically true. However, without Beyonce, I don't think Destiny's Child is Destiny's Child. Not the least of which because her father was intimately
Yeah, I was going to say
involved.
Matthew and Tina
Right.
are the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think Beyonce launches the way she does without the group. So I think they're like what is it called? Quantum entanglement. Like you can't separate them. They're a package deal. And the pop culture just supernova that is that group. They were, in my opinion, the true heirs to the Supremes, and they took, and this will be my argument that I will use later, they took the blueprint that the Supremes had already developed, and they built on top of it and are reaching heights that the Supremes did not, because they could not, because they had to build the ground floor, right? We have not talked about the music. Both of them have amazing songs, incredible songs. Doing my research today, I queued up that playlist that we made, and Bootylicious was the first song on it. And I recognize the ridiculousness of me making an argument about relative quality and using a song called Bootylicious as my fact. But oh my God, as soon as it started, that song is incredible. Is it politically moving anyone? I don't know. It did make me feel fine about being Bootylicious, right? It's making me embracing it. But the music is incredible. It is top tier pop. The Chicks are really great country crossover pop, and certainly country is unbelievably popular. I think it's more popular now than it's ever been. But when I weigh everything, Destiny's Child has to advance here. It has to. For all the things that the Chicks have done and all the incredible work that they've done, they're up against Destiny's Child. The same way that we knocked out Salt and Pepper for the Chicks, now we have to knock out the Chicks for Destiny's Child. Curtis Creekmore.
I vote for the Chicks, but it doesn't matter
Doesn't matter.
because the ultimate number one on this bracket is Destiny's Child. The people who voted said, and I think the Chicks / the Dixie Chicks were the number 4 overall seed. They're still a number 1, but they were the 4th number 1 seed. That's why I feel okay with this, because I do not feel okay making the decision, but I'm happy to throw my weight behind the Chicks because of how I feel about how I feel. Because we could go back and forth. You could name a Destiny Child song. I could name a Dixie Chicks song / the Chicks. We could go all day.
Yep.
But the people who watch / listen to this podcast said Destiny's Child is their number 1. And at the end of the day, if there's a tie, they are the tiebreaker. So
we will be advancing Destiny's Child. Are we at peace with this decision? Jake, can you live with it?
I guess. I mean, it's tough. This is a hard one. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it.
I want to hug you both and give you both Tums. Like, this is a hard one, but we did it.
See, I didn't plan ahead. See, you can tell I'm new to this because I didn't bring the Tums with me.
You'll know for next time. Always have it, and a diaper at the ready too. Next, it's the Supremes versus TLC. I'm going to start. We just traumatized poor Jake. So Curtis, I'm very comfortable traumatizing you whenever. Where are you voting on this one?
this isn't trauma for me. I said earlier that I love TLC. It's not that I don't love TLC. I do want to tell the story again that Curtis is slightly deaf, I think. Or maybe he just really doesn't listen to lyrics of a song. And growing up, Waterfalls, I thought the words to TLC's Waterfalls was, "Don't go, Jason Waterfalls, as if he was a person that they were talking to and they did not want him to go wherever he was going. And when they said 3 letters took him to his final resting place, I thought they were talking about sex. I think those were the sex. That is poor little country bumpkin Curtis, who did not know what they were talking about.
I mean, you were kind of right, but it just in a different way.
Yeah, in a different way. In a different way. So my vote, absolutely, without a doubt, goes to the Supremes.
All right. Jake.
This is harder for me. I love TLC. Crazy Sexy Cool is such a good album. Every song on it is so good. Still to this day, know the entire rap that is taken out on the radio that Lisa Left Eye does in Waterfalls. So good. As far as, again, I'm going to make it personal. It just, what got me through my formative years were things like TLC. The Supremes were okay. Like, we could listen to them. That doesn't make them any less than great music. I mean, I love their music, but like being able to hear songs that kind of taught you how to rebel against what was being told you that wasn't right. You know, I mean, and kind of showing you a portion of the world that you didn't get to see. I mean, the Supremes were pretty politically correct on the outside. I don't know their political leanings or anything like that, but TLC was definitely the opposite of that. I mean, so I have to give it to TLC. I know I'm going to get hated on by the musical elite, but I love TLC.
I don't think there's any hate here in any way, shape, or form. And we say this all the time. You cannot discount the power of nostalgia in these debates because at the end of the day, they are extremely personal decisions, right? And there's no one that's right or wrong. I mean, that's not true. There have absolutely been decisions on this podcast that have been flat out incorrect, but this is not one of them. And this one hit you right when you needed it in a very powerful way. I will make the quick argument that I do think the very existence of the Supremes was political in the 1960s. Yeah. And it was one of those things when I was a teenager, my parents were big fans of 50s and 60s music, and we would listen to it on car trips. And I would always be amazed that, oh boy, I can't believe I'm saying this. My parents are pretty racist. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. And like, they would sing along to the music by these incredible Black artists. And I remember being a teenager and being like, so how come that's okay? And yet everything else is a problem, and there's a lot to unpack there. But my main point is that you're correct. TLC, I mean, the condoms that Left Eye was wearing on as the eye patch in like the early 90s was a political statement. Waterfalls is an incredibly political argument, right? But the Supremes were also, just them existing was politics. I don't think either one has better music than the other. I'm not going to make that statement because I think you could make a pretty compelling argument for why TLC's entire catalog musically is more interesting and audacious than the Supremes, which tended to operate in a fairly narrow band. Diana certainly got much more experimental when she was doing her solo stuff. Amma, I realize that I need to have your piece before I start going on my diatribe. Go for it.
So actually, I'm glad you did go because I think a couple of things that you said kind of address what I was going to say. So to Jake's point about TLC being overtly political, I would argue that they could do that because the Supremes did what they did. Like, because the Supremes existed within this mechanism that showed that like women could be successful and powerful, TLC then said, all right, what can we do once we have that attention, in a way that the Supremes, either by virtue of the times or by Berry Gordy's kind of like standard of how he ran those groups, wasn't going to happen. So I think it's additive, right? I would also say that, and I'm not here, let me be very clear first. I'm not saying that TLC is here because of these circumstances. I'm saying that TLC is here and these circumstances are there, in the sense that we were robbed of the opportunity to get more in a very visceral, emotional way.
Yes.
And that's not why they are in the top 4. They probably would have been here regardless, but I do think there's something added here of like, what we got was so incredible and we can't have anymore. Whereas that's true of the Supremes for very different reasons, less emotional ones. So that's something to consider in this as well. And then a silly thing to run in, if anybody is watching Welcome to Fletch on Fox, it is a silly kind of documentary show about these two like young adults in the Midwest and like how they spend their time. And there's a character on that show named Big Mandy, who's played by a wonderful, hilarious woman, Crystal Smith, who's probably doing some of the funniest work on TV right now. And practically nobody is watching that show. And I believe it should change. But one of the things that she does is like, she works for a church. She's like an assistant at a church. And she runs like these after sermon, like singing events. I don't know. Someone who went to church, tell me what the actual word for that is. I don't know. Point being is like she printed out her own hymnals and picked her own songs, and she has like the church choir do waterfalls. It is hilarious. It is one of the best things I've watched on TV all year. I'll find a clip for it so you all can watch it. But it's just so funny to me because she's like, I printed my own hymnals, like we're gonna do it. And then she just makes these people from this small town in Ohio that would not be singing TLC otherwise just sing it like they're singing it at church. It's great. But ultimately, all of that kind of comes back to, I love TLC dearly. I wish we could have more of their music. Crazy Sexy Cool was incredibly formative for me as well. And without the Supremes, we would not have any of it. So my vote is the Supremes.
One thing that we keep saying is Crazy Sexy Cool, which was a huge album, right? Massively successful. But I don't want to discount that Ooh on the TLC Tip was also had huge hits off of it. It wasn't as successful as the other two. And Fan Mail, I think, actually sold more than Crazy Sexy Cool might have. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a huge debut. And they had like, so if you ever watched the TLC Behind the Music, an OG Behind the Music.
Oh gosh, I was going to say something about that, but yes, please, go ahead.
It is one of the most amazing episodes of that show I've ever seen. And it not only gives you their story, which is fascinating, and there's so much, and the tragedy of Lisa Left Eye Lopez, both what happened with her and also the amazing story about setting her boyfriend's shoes on fire.
Girl,
and
please don't burn the house down.
Exactly.
Like, I will remember that moment for the rest of my life.
That whole segment is iconic. But before we get to that, it really gives you an eye into the music business in a way no other Behind the Music ever did for me, because they're just like, do you want to know how you can be 1/3 of the best-selling girl group and the best-selling album of the year and be making less than six figures? Get out your calculators. I'm going to show you how this works. And they literally go through the points on an album and how they get them. And literally the three members of TLC were making literally sub $100,000 when their albums were at the top of the charts, because Pebbles and L.A. Reid, who were their managers and the record label owners, and no disrespect for Pebbles' girlfriend is a bop, but they were making tons of money off of them. I believe they even made TLC pay for their own tour costs to promote the album. The money came out of their share of the money. And meanwhile, they cut to it, and I think I've told the story on the podcast before, they cut to an interview with Pebbles where they're just like, did they have a bad record deal or what? And Pebbles is like, when you're starting out in music, there's no such thing as a good record deal or a bad record deal. There's a record deal or no record deal. And so like she's not apologetic about it at all, but it was such an insight into the way the music industry works, and it was an incredible episode. All of this to say, I respect the living fuck out of all of them. I think they're all incredible. If we have to give it to one of them here, I have to give it to the Supremes. I'm sorry. And Jake, I feel terrible. This is your first episode and you're getting railroaded.
I'm very polarizing.
Welcome.
Jake, this happens to me a lot and I keep coming back.
Yes.
No, I mean, I think a lot of my opinions are coming from where I came from, and it's very, very different. And Alma's opinions are coming from where she comes from, and Curtis's are coming from Kentucky of all places.
I know, right?
So it's I get it. I mean, but the Supremes were the fine music to listen to for me, and TLC was. So that was that's where I'm coming from with my opinions, not discounting the Supremes at all. But also a shout out to Miss Candy Burris of Escape from earlier for writing No Scrubs on Fan Mail. So maybe TLC wouldn't have been here without Candy Burris. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do appreciate you bringing that back around because he was a big part of that. And then Ed Sheeran had to pay her for it too, because his memory isn't what it used to be, apparently. And then one last thing I do want to bring up, there's the Behind the Music TLC, but there's also a made-for-TV VH1 original movie with TLC with Keke Palmer as Tuvaz. So, get into it. It is available in streaming on VH1.com. I checked. I suspect it's also on Paramount Plus, but don't sleep on it.
Amazing. And I just want to
Unpretty
say,
was also from that album.
and Unpretty, like literally, there are so many incredible TLC songs. Nobody's thinking anyone's discounting anybody here. But Jake, also, if all of us agreed on every one of these decisions, it would be a very boring episode of this podcast. So thank you. I just feel bad that you're the new guy and we're running it down.
I love it.
Great.
Love it.
So we have a final two of Destiny's Child versus the Supremes. We have basically, again, the blueprint versus the 3D model. That's what we're having to deal with here. And I'm going to start with Curtis.
No!
Yes, I'm starting with Curtis. Where are you voting?
God, I don't know.
And let me be very clear about this because this just happened in an episode we just recorded. I am not allowing this to end in a tie. I'm going to be very candid about that.
I think that's fair. So for those of you who don't know how the sausage is made, we all go into this with having filled out our own bracket. And then we compare those brackets, and that's kind of how we plan for how this episode is laid out. And we argue against each other where it makes sense. And going into this, I had the Supremes winning. But after all of the different conversations that we've had about why one group is better than the other, moving through this bracket in general, I literally have no idea, because not only have we said, and Eric, you said going into it, you've got the blueprint and the Supremes who, like, without them, we can't know. Obviously, we can't say like, oh, without the Supremes, you wouldn't have anybody else, because like, who knows? Life finds a way, or whatever the fuck that quote is from Jurassic Park. Who knows what would have happened without the Supremes? Maybe there would have been another group, but we've got the Supremes, and they're very, very good. Like the music, when you look at what they brought to it, you've got You Can't Hurry Love. You've got Baby Love. You've got Where Did Our Love Go? Everything's About Love. You've
So
got
much love.
You Keep Me Hanging On. Like, they had so many just smash hits. And you can't even make the argument that, oh, well, Beyonce came out of Destiny's Child. Well, you've got fucking Diana Ross, who is the original Beyonce. This is hard. This is a challenge. And then you have Destiny's Child, who is like, that is the music of my youth. That is the music that I listen to. I know you said earlier today you were on an elliptical machine and you listened to Bootylicious, and it brought so many ideas and memories out of your head. Like, there are so many, like, Destiny's Child was, if I were in the 60s, I would have been listening to the Supremes, and that would have been my group. I grew up in the 80s, 90s. Destiny's Child was my group. How can I make this decision?
And yet you must.
I'm going to say the Supremes for now.
Okay. Jake.
So, statistics that I pulled up. The Supremes had 12 number ones. Destiny's Child only had 4.
That's surprising, actually.
Supremes had 0 Grammys.
Really?
They had 2 noms. I looked that
2
up.
noms. Destiny's Child had 2 Grammys. So they're not like, it's not a runaway for Destiny's Child, but they are kind of beating them in that category. But as we've discussed before, you usually have one big star that comes out of a group. My vote's going to be for Beyonce / Destiny's Child. I mean, Diana Ross, 0 Grammys. Beyonce, most Grammys of all time. I mean, I don't know if that's fair, but whenever it comes down to 2 such amazing groups with such great catalogs, and I mean, you could make the argument that Michelle and Kelly are bigger stars than whoever the other Supremes were.
Mary Birdsong. And actually, there were a couple other Supremes. It was not just, there was, I knew this. Like, I was thinking about it on the walk home. I knew their names, and I've forgotten them now.
But all of that to say, I mean, my vote's going to be for Destiny's Child. Not an easy vote. I'm making it sound like it's easy, but the Supremes are just their voices, everything about their songs is just beautiful and calming and great. But Destiny's Child was just like right in my wheelhouse. So I mean, that's the soundtrack of those teen years. So Destiny's Child.
I thought that you had gone catatonic for a moment there. Are you
might
okay?
have.
Yeah.
I'm going to be okay. This is an audio medium, so it helps no one, but I will describe it. My head has been down, like, on the table for most of this debate because this is a really, really hard one. And how many times have I cried at an episode about Muppets, Eric? Do you remember?
Oh my God. Yeah, seriously. It was at least 3.
Every Muppet episode we've had, I've been on and I've cried in the final.
Yep, it's true.
Muppets are not involved here, but I might do it anyway. I'm just letting you know. I've said it dozens of times already. Probably just going to say it again. We would not have Destiny's Child without the Supremes. So much so that when they decided to make a film of Dreamgirls, a movie that makes no secret of being inspired by the Supremes, Beyonce played their Diana Ross equivalent. That's how deeply tied these are. Like, these groups in many ways have so many similarities that it's really both difficult and absolutely correct that they go up against each other in the final.
Yeah.
And both of them have meant so much to me. I would say the Supremes on a really formative level, and then Destiny's Child, and then later each of these women in their solo careers, but then still find time to, like, come back and support each other. That's taught me a lot as an adult. So the impact is, I'm not going to say equal, but there's impact on both sides really, really deeply in terms of, like, who I am as a person that keeps getting to come back to the show and yell about stuff she loves. But I keep coming back to the idea that, like, if it had not been for the blueprint that Diana Ross and the Supremes put together, we wouldn't have Beyonce. We just wouldn't. We wouldn't have any of Destiny's Child. We probably wouldn't have any Black groups that were able to transcend into predominantly white audiences. Like, that concept would not exist without the Supremes. So and they would never deny this, but there's so much that Destiny's Child owes to the Supremes for what they were able to do that it's incredibly hard for me to see Best, however you choose to define it, not having their name next to it. I don't know what I would do if that was where we landed.
Yeah. It's funny because coming into this episode, I was exactly on that. Like, we have Beyonce is amazing. I'm not taking anything away from Beyonce. Please don't at me. But, like, we had the proto Beyonce, which was Diana Ross. And so why wouldn't you vote for the original? I have to say, over the course of this debate, it has actually made me appreciate Destiny's Child and Beyonce more. Not that I didn't already, but I feel as though I'm swinging back to the Supremes. And it's you made a point, Curtis, like all their songs were about love. Early on they were because they had to be very palatable to everybody, right? But then when you get into Love Child and when you get into some of the later stuff, it is more overtly bringing to light things that were more challenging.
As Motown overall was able to be a label that did that, which they fought very, very, very hard. And I think as it got to a place where Motown decided they wanted to be more about that, eventually the Supremes got to get in on that as well.
As I was reading about it earlier today, their producer was like, you need to be palatable to both Black and white audiences. And they did that. They towed the line. But once they found their fame and they were able to infiltrate and help white audiences to understand that Black people are talented, they're like to break down those walls that had been built. They were able to expand more and break into and they were able to do so much.
And to go back to the Temptations of it, like a big part of what the Temptations realized they had to do was to be able to appeal to white audiences because the Supremes kept beating them. And then also one of their members dated Mary Wilson from the Supremes. I can't remember which one. I'll listen to the musical album again and let you know. But they're deeply connected to each other. But yeah, a lot of what they were able to do politically was because the Temptations had done it, but also the Temptations got to be where they were by following the lead that the Supremes had already followed, which was that palatableness to white audiences.
And thank you. It was Mary Wilson and I believe it's Cindy Birdsong, and Flo was one of the other members of the Supremes, and I cannot remember her last name, and I'm sorry because she should be remembered. One thing I do want to point out, we keep saying that the Supremes were the OG girl group, and they weren't. Like we even pointed out earlier, like the Andrews sisters predated them,
and the Shirelles.
There were other acts that absolutely were still out there, but the Supremes perfected it. The Supremes took something that was already there, and they really created something that transcended. It transcended what they started out by doing. And what's funny to me, I'm going to bring this back to boy bands for a second, because on that one, we kicked out the Beatles really early because we're like, the Beatles are more than a boy band. The Beatles are artists, and they are almost like a religion. I don't think that is true on girl groups. I think the Supremes are unequivocally a girl group, and it is not looked at as a pejorative in any way, whereas boy band is. And I find that so interesting. The other comment I was going to allude to in our break that Curtis is like, shut your whore mouth, we have a podcast to record, don't burn pod, was that with the boy bands, it ultimately ended up as like a gang war between Team NSYNC versus Team Backstreet Boys. It got very ugly. For some odd reason within girl groups, it tends to be there's one, and I'm sorry I'm going to use this term, but supreme, and then there are other smaller groups around them at any given time, but it's very rare you have two equally popular girl groups in the same space at the same time. Amma?
That's how they socialize women.
Right, there you go. There you go. I think the only time I can think of it is Fifth Harmony versus Little Mix. That's the only time I can think of it. Like,
or if you're going single, Britney versus Christina.
Sure, absolutely. But all of this to say, we have the two tent poles, I think, of girl groups in this final two. It's a great final two. I'm going to defer to the OG on this one, and I'm sorry. And again, Jake, you've done such a great job, and you've been such a good sport. I feel bad that we've been knocking all of your people out.
Please come back. I really enjoy your energy.
Hey,
yes.
It's perfectly okay. If it's the Supremes, I'm fine with it. But if anybody else would have taken out Destiny's Child, besides maybe the Chicks, I would have been upset. But it makes sense to me. Your arguments all make sense. It's just, in my heart of hearts, that's where Destiny's Child lives. And again, they gave us Beyonce, and we can't ask for much more than that.
Absolutely. And when we do inevitably the episode on best solo artists to come out of a musical group, which will happen, we will have a Diana Ross versus Beyonce debate, and I think I would go with Beyonce on that one.
That just made my chest hurt. Oh my God.
Justin Timberlake is going to be in that final four.
Michael Jackson's going to be in there too. It's going to be a barn burner, ladies and gentlemen. But that being said, there you have it. Our pick for the best girl group is the Supremes. Do you agree? Do you think we spent too much time in Spice World? Tell us how you really feel by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com, or find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Mastodon. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you can hear about what new debates are coming soon, vote in open polls, and even decide which topics we tackle next, like, for instance, that best solo act to come out of a musical group. If you really enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to like and rate the episode of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen on. I want to say thank you to my panel. You always provide me with some TLC, and thank you for listening. If you loved what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get even more exclusive content and get episodes a whole day early. We hope you have a good one, and remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. Zig-a-zag.